Cooper's lungs burned as he kicked deeper into the churning waters of Hydros Prime, his dive suit's pressure readings climbing past safe limits. The water planet's turbulent oceans had claimed 3 exploration drones in the past week, but humans had something the mechanical scouts lacked: instinct and the ability to adapt to liquid chaos. 30 meters down, his helmet's lights cut through the murky depths, revealing something that made his pulse quicken. Ancient metal gleamed through centuries of coral growth, geometric patterns that screamed artificial origin. Cooper rubbed his thumb against his knuckles, a nervous habit he'd carried since his first deep-sea expedition on Earth. This was different from anything in the databases. "Leah, you're getting this feed, right?" His voice crackled through the comm, fighting the interference from the planet's magnetic storms. Every photon came her crisp reply from the surface platform. "Cooper, those alloy compositions, they're not in any known periodic table. Definitely pre-galactic civilization." The structure stretched beyond his light's reach, carved directly into an underwater mountain. Cooper's weathered hands traced the surface, finding grooves that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. His sharp green eyes narrowed as he recognized patterns, not random decay, but purposeful engineering. Above, Leah hunched over her analysis console, her jet-black hair escaping its metal clip as she worked. Grease smudged her olive skin where she'd absently wiped her hands. Her dark brown eyes flickered between readings, tapping a stylus against her palm in rapid succession. "Cooper, the energy signatures are off the charts. This isn't just a relic. It's active." The Thaloran observer on the platform shuddered, their translucent skins bioluminescent spots flickering in distress. "Your water-dwelling defies nature," they hummed in their melodic voice, webbed hands folded tightly. "Death liquid claims all who enter its embrace." Leah glanced up from her console, one eyebrow arching slightly. "Not humans. We're built for this." She turned back to the readouts, her voice gaining the technical precision that Cooper had learned to trust completely. The structure's generating a localized field, tachyon patterns consistent with dimensional folding. Cooper's exploration took him around the structure's perimeter, his movements fluid despite the crushing depth. Years of diving had taught him to read water like others read star charts. The current here felt wrong, not natural convection, but something drawing energy inward. "Leah, I'm seeing what looks like an entrance. Triangular opening, about 3 meters across." "Absolutely not." Her voice carried the edge it got when she was calculating risks. "We don't know what we're dealing with." But Cooper was already moving, his restless energy overriding caution. The entrance's edges were smooth, machined to tolerances that spoke of incredible engineering. As he approached, the bioluminescent grooves brightened, responding to his presence. "Cooper!" Leah's shout echoed through his helmet as every sensor on her board went critical. The structure was awakening. Light flooded from the entrance, and Cooper felt a pull, not physical, but something deeper. The water around him began to shimmer, reality bending in ways that made his inner ear rebel. Through the comm, he heard Leah's sharp intake of breath and the Thaloran's harmonic keen of fear. "It's a gateway," Leah whispered, her instruments painting impossible readings across her screens. "Cooper, you found a teleportation matrix, but the power requirements—" She paused, recalculating. This thing could move objects across stellar distances. The implications hit them both simultaneously. Leah's hands stilled on her console, and Cooper floated motionless in the water, processing what this meant. Every species in the galaxy avoided water planets, considering them death traps. But if these worlds held functional teleportation networks— "We need to document everything," Leah said, her voice regaining its steady cadence. "Full spectral analysis, quantum resonance mapping." The Thaloran's spots flared bright amber, their crest flattening against their spine. "The Council of Spheres will not permit this. Water death must remain forbidden. Your discovery threatens the order of things." Cooper's jaw clenched as he absorbed the alien's words. The Galactic Council had built their power on controlling traditional hyperspace routes. A network they couldn't access or regulate would shatter their monopoly. "How long before they know?" "Communication buoys monitor all system traffic," the Thaloran replied, their bioluminescence dimming to fearful blue. "Perhaps one solar rotation before enforcement arrives." Leah's fingers flew over her controls, downloading every byte of data the sensors could capture. Then we work fast. Cooper, I need you to map the interior structure. If this is part of a network, there should be navigation matrices, coordinate systems. As Cooper approached the entrance again, the structure's hum deepened, harmonizing with the planet's tidal forces. The water itself seemed to welcome him, currents guiding rather than hindering his progress. Behind him, the surface platform blazed with activity as Leah coordinated with Earth Command, her dry humor cutting through the tension as she briefed admirals who'd never seen an ocean. "One more thing," she called down to him, her voice softer now. "Whatever's in there, it's been waiting. The activation patterns suggest it responds to life signs, but only specific ones, only swimmers." Cooper grinned, the expression hidden inside his helmet but audible in his voice. "Good thing humans never learned to stay on dry land." He kicked forward into the luminous gateway, his movements confident despite the unknown. The structure accepted him, its ancient systems recognizing something that billions of other species had never possessed, the ability to embrace what they feared. As he passed through the threshold, the last thing he heard was Leah's quiet promise, "I've got your back, hotshot, always." The water around him exploded into light, and Cooper vanished into the depths of a mystery that would reshape the galaxy. 3 days after Cooper's initial dive, the surface platform buzzed with controlled chaos. Leah had called in favors across 3 star systems, assembling a team of humanity's best deep-water specialists. Her engineering station now occupied half the platform, cables snaking between quantum analyzers and improvised pressure simulators. Cooper emerged from his morning dive, water streaming from his suit as he climbed the platform ladder. His sun-bleached hair was plastered to his skull, and his sharp green eyes held the intense focus that came after hours in the depths. "The gateway's stable, but it's learning our patterns. Each dive, the response time gets faster." "Because it's designed for regular use," Leah replied without looking up from her calculations. Her stylus tapped against her palm in rapid staccato as she processed overnight sensor data. "This isn't a one-time portal, it's infrastructure, like a subway system, but for starships." Mason Ryan, the team's pressure systems expert, shook his head as he calibrated diving equipment. "Subway systems don't require swimming through potentially lethal alien tech." "No," Cooper said, his low voice carrying that dry humor Leah had learned to recognize as confidence, "but they do require someone to drive the train." The Thalaran liaison, who'd finally shared their name as Veltar, stood at the platform's edge, their bioluminescent spots pulsing in anxious amber patterns. "The Council fleet approaches. 3 rotations, perhaps 4. Your window shrinks like tide pools in Starfire." Minnie Robinson, their xenobiology specialist, looked up from her analysis of water samples Cooper had collected. "Veltar, your people must have some historical knowledge about these structures. The biological components show signs of symbiosis. They were meant to work with living beings." Veltar's crest flattened against their spine, webbed hands folding tighter. "Ancient warnings speak of the deep builders who vanished when water death claimed their worlds. We learned to fear what they left behind." Leah's fingers stilled on her console as she processed this. Not fear, respect. The deep builders didn't die out. They integrated with their technology. The network isn't just mechanical, it's partially organic. She looked up at Cooper, her dark brown eyes bright with the breakthrough excitement he'd learned to trust. "That's why it responds to swimmers. It's looking for partners, not users." Cooper rubbed his thumb against his knuckles, processing the implications. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning you don't just use the gateway, you communicate with it." Leah stood, her compact frame radiating the confidence that came when her engineering insights aligned with observed phenomena. "The next dive isn't just exploration, it's first contact." Tom Rivers, their underwater navigation specialist, voiced what they were all thinking. First contact with infrastructure that could revolutionize galactic travel. The political implications are why the Council wants to bury this, Cooper finished. He began checking his dive gear, movements economical and practiced. All the more reason to make contact before they arrive. Veltar's harmonic hum took on distressed overtones. "Your species courts death liquid as others court mates. This defies natural order." Natural for who? Cooper asked, sealing his helmet connections. Leah, what's our communication protocol? She handed him a modified scanner, its surface bristling with sensors she'd jury-rigged overnight. Start with basic mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions. If the network is as sophisticated as I think, it'll recognize intelligence and try to establish common ground. The dive team assembled at the platform's edge, Cooper leading, with Mason and Tom as backup swimmers. Minnie would monitor biological responses from the surface, while Leah coordinated the technical analysis. Veltar remained their reluctant cultural consultant, their spots flickering between curiosity and terror. Remember, Leah called as Cooper prepared for descent, we're not just exploring anymore. We're applying for membership in something the galaxy's ignored for millennia. Cooper's grin was audible over the comm. Good thing humans never were much for following galactic fashion. The dive proceeded smoothly until they reached the gateway's threshold. This time, the structure's response was immediate. Patterns of light that seemed to acknowledge Cooper's presence, then shift into configurations that hurt to look at directly. Leah, you getting this? Cooper's voice carried wonder and unease in equal measure. Every photon. Cooper, those patterns, they're not random. The network is trying to communicate, but the language is mathematical structures in four-dimensional space. Minnie's voice crackled through the comm from her biology station. Biomagnetic readings are off the charts. Cooper, the structure isn't just responding to you, it's scanning you, learning your neural patterns. Cooper felt the water around him shift, currents forming complex whorls that seemed to guide his hands toward specific sections of the gateway's surface. When he touched them, the entire structure hummed in harmonious resonance. That's it, Leah breathed, her instruments painting a picture of energy buildups that defied conventional physics. Cooper, you're not just communicating, you're interfacing. The network wants to share navigation data. The water inside the gateway began to glow, and Cooper felt that familiar pull, stronger now, more insistent. Leah, I think it's ready for passengers. Absolutely not without proper. But Cooper was already moving, his restless energy overriding protocol. The gateway accepted him completely this time, the transition smooth as silk. One moment he was in Hydros Prime's turbulent ocean, the next he was floating in crystal-clear water beneath an alien sky. Cooper! Leah's voice was sharp with worry and wonder. Your telemetry just jumped 47 light-years. You're in the Kepler 442 system. Cooper's amazed laughter echoed through the comm as he took in the underwater city surrounding him. Not ruins, but active infrastructure. Lights moved through transparent tubes, and the water itself seemed alive with purpose. Leah, you need to see this. The network isn't just functional, it's thriving. Back on Hydros Prime, Veltar's bioluminescence had shifted to odd silver. Impossible, they hummed. Water death does not permit such journeys. Leah was already calculating transit protocols, her mind racing ahead to the implications. It's not death, Veltar. It's life, a different kind of life than your people understood. As Cooper began his exploration of the new node, reporting structures and technologies that shouldn't exist, Leah felt the first tremor of what this discovery would mean. Humanity had just been offered membership in a galactic civilization the rest of the galaxy had forgotten existed. And judging by the comm traffic Minnie was intercepting, the Council of Spheres was about to learn that their monopoly on interstellar travel had just become obsolete. Cooper floated in the center of what he'd started calling Node 7, the Kepler 442 terminus of the network. The underwater city stretched beyond his vision in all directions, but after 5 days of exploration, he'd learned to read its patterns. Unlike the abandoned structures they'd initially expected, this place pulsed with automated activity. Maintenance drones S. Robinson Ming through transparent tubes, energy conduits that shifted and adapted to his presence. Leah, the power distribution here is incredible. Cooper's voice carried across 47 light-years through quantum-entangled communication arrays. The whole system adjusts based on user needs. It's like the network learns from every interaction. Back on Hydros Prime, Leah hunched over her expanded sensor array, her jet-black hair escaping its clip as she processed data streams from 7 different nodes Cooper had discovered. Her stylus tapped against her palm in rapid succession, a sure sign she was deep in problem-solving mode. The architecture suggests a distributed intelligence, Cooper. Each node shares information with the whole network. Veltar stood at the platform's edge, their translucent skins bioluminescence now cycling through colors that had no names in any human language, the Thalaran equivalent of stunned disbelief. Your water dweller travels between star deaths as others walk between chambers. This reshapes all understanding. Tom Rivers looked up from his navigation console, where he'd been mapping Cooper's routes through the network. Leah, we're looking at travel times that make hyperspace look like walking. Cooper crossed 47 light-years in 12 seconds. 13.7 seconds, Leah corrected automatically, her dark brown eyes flickering between readouts. But the energy expenditure was minimal. The network draws power from local stellar magnetic fields. It's essentially free once you're connected. Cooper's voice crackled through the comm with barely contained excitement. That's not the best part. I'm looking at star charts here, and there are indicators for hundreds of nodes. This network spans the entire galactic arm. Minnie Robinson emerged from her biology lab, her face pale with wonder. The water samples Cooper's been sending back, they're not just water. There are microscopic organisms unlike anything in our databases. They seem to be part of the network's information processing system. Mason Ryan paused in his equipment checks, processing the implications. Living computers. The entire network is a hybrid of technology and biology. Leah's fingers stilled on her console as she absorbed this breakthrough. Her one eyebrow arched slightly. The expression Cooper had learned meant she was about to say something that would change everything. Not hybrid, symbiotic. The Deep Builders didn't just create this network, they became part of it. Through the comm, Cooper's voice carried a new note of awe. Leah, you need to see what I'm looking at. There's something moving through the water, not mechanical, not biological, but something in between. Describe it, she said, her voice taking on the focused precision that meant she was recording everything for later analysis. It's like liquid light, but with purpose. It's been following me for the past hour, staying just at the edge of perception. When I try to approach, it moves away, but it's not afraid. More like curious. Veltar's harmonic hum took on urgent overtones. The Deep Builders were said to have transcended physical form, if such entities still exist within the water death. It's not death, Leah said firmly, standing from her console with the decisive movement that signaled a breakthrough. Veltar, your people have been wrong for thousands of years. This isn't a death trap. It's an ecosystem, and Cooper's making contact with its inhabitants. The implications crashed over the team like a tidal wave. They weren't just exploring abandoned ruins, they were discovering a parallel civilization that had evolved beyond physical constraints. Cooper, Leah called through the comm, try the mathematical sequences we used at the first node. If these entities are connected to the network's intelligence... Cooper's response came after several minutes of tense silence. It worked. The entity approached when I started broadcasting prime numbers, and Leah, it's trying to communicate back, not through sound or light, but directly through the water. I can feel meaning in the currents. Minnie's instruments detected the change immediately. Cooper's neural activity is spiking. Whatever's happening, it's affecting him on a neurological level. Not affecting, Cooper's voice was distant, wondering. Connecting. I can sense the network structure through the water. It's showing me navigation routes, power flows, even security protocols. The network isn't just infrastructure, it's a living system, and it's been waiting for someone who could interface with it directly. Leah felt her heart race as she processed the implications. Cooper, what you're describing sounds like direct neural interface. Are you in any danger? The opposite, he replied, his voice carrying a calm certainty that made her both proud and worried. I feel more connected to this place than I've ever felt anywhere. It's like the water here knows me. Tom's navigation display suddenly erupted with new data. Leah, Cooper's mapping system just downloaded complete navigational charts for the entire network. We're looking at over 300 active nodes across 17 star systems. The platform fell silent as they absorbed the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Not just a transportation network, but a galactic civilization that had been hiding in plain sight, waiting in the one environment most species considered deadly. Veltar's spots shifted to thoughtful purple. If your species can access what ours cannot, the Council of Spheres will see this as threat beyond measure. Or opportunity beyond measure, Leah countered, her mind already racing ahead to the political implications. Veltar, your people could learn to use this network too. It doesn't require swimming. It requires willingness to interface with aquatic environments. The Thalorans' crest rose slightly, their equivalent of surprise. You would share such power? Cooper's laugh echoed across the light years. That's what the network is for, Veltar. It's not about exclusion, it's about connection. The Deep Builders designed it to bring different species together, not keep them apart. As if summoned by his words, the liquid light entity he'd been communicating with suddenly blazed brighter, and Cooper's voice took on an urgent edge. Something's coming. The entity is showing me warning patterns. Ships approaching this system, Council enforcement vessels. Leah's hands flew over her controls, pulling up long-range sensor data. Confirmed. 3 Council dreadnoughts just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. They'll reach us in 36 hours. Cooper's voice carried grim determination. Then we better make sure they understand what they're walking into. Leah, I'm coming back. But first, I need to learn how to bring others through the network safely. As Cooper began his preparations for return transit, Leah coordinated with Earth Command, updating them on discoveries that would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. The Ocean Nexus wasn't just a transportation network, it was humanity's introduction to a galactic community they'd never known existed. And judging by the ships converging on their position, that introduction was about to become very complicated. The Council dreadnought Hegemony's Reach dropped out of hyperspace with the subtle violence of a hammer striking glass. Its commander, Enforcer Kex Thul, stood rigid on the bridge, mandibles clacking in rhythmic irritation as tactical displays painted the human research platform in targeting overlays. Water dwellers, Kex Thul's guttural voice carried contempt that made the bridge crew flinch, contaminating sacred death liquid with their presence. On Hydros Prime's surface platform, Leah tracked the dreadnought's approach through sensors that weren't designed for military reconnaissance. Her engineering station now resembled a war room, displays showing power buildups and weapon signatures that made her stomach clench with professional dread. Cooper, whatever you're planning down there, make it fast, she called through the quantum comm. That Council ship is broadcasting seizure protocols for our entire operation. 30 meters beneath the platform, Cooper floated at the gateway's threshold, his conversation with the liquid light entity growing more urgent by the minute. The being, which he'd started thinking of as the Nexus Guide, pulsed with patterns that bypassed language entirely, communicating through pressure waves that his nervous system somehow interpreted as meaning. The network senses threat, Cooper reported, his voice tight with concentration. But not from the Council ships, from something else. The guide is showing me defensive protocols? Veltar's bioluminescent spots flickered in panicked amber as they monitored Council communications. Enforcer Kex Thul leads the fleet. Their reputation for eliminating threats to galactic order is comprehensive. Then they're about to meet something they can't eliminate, Leah muttered, her fingers flying over controls as she prepared emergency data dumps to Earth Command. If the Council destroyed their research, at least humanity would retain the knowledge. The first sign of trouble came not from the approaching fleet, but from the ocean itself. Water around the platform began to churn with unnatural patterns, and Cooper's voice carried a new edge of concern. Something's wrong. The guide is showing me warning symbols I don't recognize. Minnie looked up from her biology console, her face pale. The microorganism readings are spiking. Whatever lives in this network, it's agitated. That's when the sabotage revealed itself. Enforcer Kex Thul hadn't waited for their fleet's arrival. They'd launched stealth infiltrators hours earlier. The explosion that rocked the platform's eastern section sent Leah stumbling, her carefully calibrated instruments screaming alarms. "Council saboteurs!" Tom Rivers shouted, his navigation display sparking as secondary explosions rippled through the platform's support structure. But the real shock came from the ocean's response. The water around the platform rose in impossible spirals, defying gravity and physics alike. Cooper's voice crackled through static-filled comm. The network's defending itself. This isn't just infrastructure, it's alive, and it's angry. The liquid light entity that had been Cooper's guide suddenly blazed with intensity that made his helmet's auto-darkening filters trigger. But instead of communication, what washed over him was presence, vast, ancient, and utterly alien. Who seeks passage through the deep paths. The voice didn't come through his comm system or his ears. It resonated through the water itself, vibrations that his bones interpreted as words. "I'm Cooper," he managed, his usual confidence shaken by contact with something that dwarfed human comprehension. "We're explorers trying to understand the network. Understanding requires worthiness. The Council of Spheres has sent death dealers to silence the waters once more. Will you permit this?" The question carried weight that made Cooper's pressure suit feel inadequate. Above him, the platform shook under another saboteur attack, and Leah's voice cut through the static. "Cooper, whatever's happening down there, we need options. Council forces are demanding our immediate surrender." Cooper looked around the underwater chamber, seeing it now not as a machine, but as something alive, something that had been waiting for eons for someone capable of swimming in its depths. "What do you need from me?" "Proof. The Deep Builders created these paths for those who could embrace the flow between worlds. Your species shows promise, but promises are wind. Deed is current." The water around Cooper suddenly thickened, becoming viscous as honey while remaining perfectly breathable. He found himself moving not through liquid, but through something that responded to will as much as muscle. "Cooper!" Leah's voice carried across the quantum link, tight with worry. "Your biometrics just went haywire. What's happening?" "Testing," he replied, his voice steady despite facing something beyond his experience. "The network wants to know if we're worth defending." The Nexus Guardian, for that's what this presence clearly was, began Cooper's trial. The chamber around him shifted, walls flowing like water to create a maze of passages that stretched beyond physical space. Each path led to different challenges. Some required pure swimming skill through currents that shifted faster than thought. Others demanded problem-solving under pressure that would crush ordinary humans. But the deepest test was philosophical. In a chamber that existed outside normal geometry, Cooper faced representations of humanity's potential futures, versions where they hoarded the network's power, versions where they shared it freely, versions where they used it to dominate other species or to connect them. The Deep Builders faced this choice, the Guardian's voice explained, as Cooper navigated ethical mazes more complex than any physical challenge. They chose integration over domination. What does your species choose? Above, Leah coordinated desperate defensive measures as Council infiltrators pressed their attack. But her real attention was focused on Cooper's biometric readings, watching his life signs as he underwent trials she could barely comprehend. "Veltar," she called to the Thaloran observer, "your people's legends about the Deep Builders, did they mention Guardians?" Veltar's spots shifted to odd silver. "Ancient songs speak of the deep minds, entities that judged which species could touch the sacred waters without corruption. We always assumed they were myths." "Not myths," many said, monitoring readings that defied biological explanation. "Evolved intelligence. Cooper isn't just being tested, he's communicating with something that transcended physical existence." In the trial chamber, Cooper faced his final challenge, a perfect replica of the surface platform under attack, with the power to save his team by using the network's defenses. The catch, doing so would prove humanity was just another species that solved problems through violence. Cooper studied the scenario, feeling the Guardian's attention like a weight on his shoulders. Then he smiled, the expression hidden inside his helmet but audible in his voice. "You're testing the wrong thing." Instead of using the network's power to attack the Council forces, Cooper reached out through the quantum link to Leah. "I need you to broadcast something on all Council frequencies." "Cooper, this isn't the time." "Trust me. Tell them we've made contact with the network's governing intelligence and it's willing to negotiate, but only if they call off their attack." Leah's stylus stilled against her palm as she processed this. Then her one eyebrow arched, the expression that meant she understood his thinking completely. "You're gambling that their curiosity will outweigh their aggression. The Guardian's testing whether we choose violence or communication. Time to show it what humans really choose when given the option." As Leah's broadcast reached the Council fleet, Cooper felt the Guardian's approval like warm current around his body. The trial chamber dissolved, returning him to the gateway's threshold, but something fundamental had changed. The network no longer felt alien, it felt welcoming. "Your species shows wisdom in the deep places." The Guardian's voice carried satisfaction that transcended language. "The paths between worlds open to those who would connect rather than conquer." Cooper's grin was audible over the comm as he felt new knowledge flood his consciousness, not just navigation data, but the philosophical frameworks that made the network possible. "Leah, I think we just passed the interview, and our new boss wants to meet with the Council personally." The implications rippled through the team like shock waves. They hadn't just discovered an ancient network. They'd been accepted into a galactic community that operated by rules no one had imagined. And judging by the sudden silence from the Council fleet, Enforcer Kexthul was about to learn that their monopoly on galactic authority had just encountered something far older and more powerful than their weapons. The Council Dreadnought's bridge had gone silent, except for the rhythmic clacking of Enforcer Kexthul's mandibles, a sound their crew had learned to fear. The water planet's surface displayed tactical readings that made no sense, energy signatures that violated physics, gravitational anomalies that suggested the ocean itself was defying natural law. "Explain to me," Kexthul's guttural voice cut through the bridge's tension, "how a primitive human research platform is generating power levels equivalent to a stellar reactor." Their tactical officer, a nervous Zephyrian with chromatophore patterns that betrayed their stress, consulted readings that had been climbing steadily for the past hour. "The energy source appears to be distributed throughout the planet's hydrosphere, Enforcer, as if the water itself has become weaponized." 30 meters beneath Hydros Prime's surface, Cooper floated in the presence of something that made his earlier encounters with the Nexus Guide seem like casual conversation. The Guardian's true form was a symphony of light and current that existed in dimensions his mind could barely process, but its intent was crystal clear: comprehensive evaluation of humanity's worthiness to join the galactic community they'd accidentally discovered. The Deep Builders faced extinction rather than surrender their principles. The Guardian's voice resonated through water that had become something more than liquid, a medium for consciousness itself. "Your species has shown initial promise, but swimming in shallow pools is not the same as navigating the deep currents of cosmic responsibility." Cooper felt the water around him shift, reality becoming malleable as the trial began in earnest. But this time he wasn't alone. Through the quantum link he could sense Leah's presence, not physically but intellectually, her engineering mind somehow interfacing with the network's deeper structures. "Cooper," her voice came not through his comm, but through the water itself. "I'm seeing your biometrics integrated with something vast. Whatever's happening, I'm connected to it too." The Guardian's approval resonated like distant thunder. Partnership. The Deep Builders understood that no single mind, however capable, could navigate the complexities of cosmic citizenship. Your species shows this wisdom instinctively. The trial that unfolded challenged not just Cooper's swimming skills, but the entire team's collaborative abilities. The Guardian created scenarios that required Leah's technical expertise, Minnie's biological insights, Tom's navigation instincts, and even Veltar's cultural knowledge, all coordinated through Cooper's direct interface with the network. In one challenge, they faced a scenario where a collapsing node threatened to strand thousands of travelers across multiple star systems. Cooper provided the physical connection to the network, swimming through conditions that would liquefy most species, while Leah calculated power redistribution patterns that stabilized the failing infrastructure. Minnie identified biological components that needed specific environmental conditions, and Tom mapped evacuation routes through the network's maze of connections. Your coordination suggests evolution toward collective intelligence, the Guardian observed as they successfully resolved the crisis simulation. This is promising, but coordination in crisis is simple compared to coordination in prosperity. The next trial tested their decision-making when faced with abundance rather than scarcity. The Guardian presented them with a fully functional network connecting thousands of worlds and asked, "How do you prevent paradise from becoming prison?" Cooper found himself swimming through representations of civilizations that had grown dependent on the network's convenience, species that had forgotten how to explore because travel had become effortless. Leah experienced the engineering challenges of maintaining technology that surpassed its creator's understanding. Many witnessed biological stagnation among species that no longer needed to adapt. The deep builder's greatest fear, the Guardian explained as they worked through these philosophical mazes, was that the network would end the very exploration and growth that made its creation possible. How does your species address this paradox? Cooper's answer came not through words, but through action. Instead of trying to solve the paradox, he embraced it, swimming not away from the challenges but deeper into them. You don't solve it, you live it. Keep exploring, keep growing, even when you don't have to, especially when you don't have to. Leah's contribution was characteristically precise. The network isn't the destination, it's the tool. What matters is what you do when you get where you're going. The Guardian's response was a shift in the water that felt like cosmic laughter. Wisdom in the deep places. Your species may indeed be ready for the responsibilities that come with these gifts. But the final trial was yet to come, and it arrived in the form of a direct challenge from the surface. Enforcer Kexthul, frustrated by their inability to comprehend or counter the planet's defenses, had made a decision that would either end the crisis or escalate it beyond recovery. "Cooper," Leah's voice carried urgent worry, "the Council ship is charging weapons, not conventional armaments, quantum destabilizers. They're planning to crack the planet's crust." The Guardian's presence intensified around Cooper, and suddenly he understood the true nature of his trial. Not just personal worthiness, but species worthiness in the face of genuine threat. The network could defend itself and its nodes, but doing so would mean revealing capabilities that would terrify the galactic community into unified opposition against humanity. The Deep Builders faced this choice at their end. The Guardian's voice carried ancient sorrow. Reveal their true power and face the galaxy's fear, or allow themselves to be driven from physical existence. They chose transcendence. What does your species choose? Cooper looked up through 30 meters of water toward the surface where his team waited, then beyond to the Council ship preparing to commit genocide to maintain their authority. His thumb rubbed against his knuckles as he considered options that would determine humanity's galactic future. "We choose option 3, he said finally, his voice carrying the confidence that came when his instincts aligned with Leah's analysis. "We don't hide our capabilities, and we don't use them to dominate. We demonstrate them responsibly and invite cooperation." The Guardian's approval flowed through the water like warmth. Expand this thought. "Leah," Cooper called through the network's communication matrix, "remember when you taught me how your engineering worked? Not by showing me completed projects, but by letting me help build them?" Her understanding was immediate. Demonstration through participation. "Cooper, you're brilliant." Through the Guardian's vast consciousness, Cooper felt approval ripple like tidal currents. The ancient intelligence had been waiting millennia for a species that understood the difference between power over and power with. "Explain your proposal." Cooper's answer came through action as much as words. Instead of accepting the network's defensive capabilities, he reached out through the quantum link to Enforcer Kexthul's ship. "Guardian, can you facilitate communication?" The water around him shimmered, and suddenly Cooper found himself speaking directly to the Council bridge. His voice resonated through their ship's systems with authority that made the crew's instinctive fear responses trigger. Enforcer Kexthul, Cooper's words carried the weight of the network behind them. "You're about to make a terrible mistake. Before you fire those weapons, let me show you what you're really dealing with." Kexthul's mandibles clacked in reflexive aggression. Human water dweller, your threats cannot— Not threats, Cooper interrupted, his tone carrying Leah's precision and his own deep-water calm. Invitation. Your tactical officer mentioned energy signatures you can't explain. Want to understand them? The Guardian's consciousness expanded, touching Cooper's mind with knowledge that made his previous understanding seem shallow. Through this connection, Cooper began explaining the network not as conquered territory, but as discovered ecosystem, a galactic civilization that had evolved beyond the Council's comprehension, but not beyond their participation. The Deep Builders didn't disappear, Enforcer. They transcended physical limitations while maintaining connection to the worlds they protected. What you're seeing isn't weaponization, it's communication at a scale your instruments weren't designed to detect. On Hydros Prime's platform, Leah watched her instruments register impossible readings as Cooper somehow channeled the network's educational protocols directly to the Council ship. Her stylus stilled against her palm as she realized what he was doing, not just talking about the network, but letting the Council experience a limited version of its consciousness. Cooper, she breathed into the comm, their ship's sensors are synchronizing with our research data. You're teaching them to perceive what we've discovered. Veltar's bioluminescence shifted through colors of awe as they monitored the exchange. The water dweller shares sacred knowledge with those who would destroy it. This defies all survival instinct. No, Minnie said from her biology station, understanding spreading across her face, it demonstrates survival strategy. Cooper's proving that cooperation creates more security than domination. Through the network's interface, Cooper could sense Kexthal's confusion as their instruments began detecting patterns that had been invisible moments before. The quantum destabilizers, designed to crack planetary crusts, suddenly revealed their true potential, not as weapons, but as incredibly crude attempts to manipulate space-time that the network had been effortlessly correcting for hours. Your weapons cannot harm this world, Cooper explained, his voice carrying the patience of deep currents, because the network treats them as navigational errors to be compensated for. But Enforcer, imagine what your people could accomplish if you learned to work with these systems instead of against them. The Guardian's presence enveloped Cooper's consciousness, sharing visions of what the Council species could become, not subjects or enemies, but partners in exploration that spanned galactic distances. Through Cooper's interface, these possibilities transmitted directly to Kexthal's ship. The change in the Enforcer's voice was subtle but unmistakable, fear replaced by wonder. These images travel between star deaths in moments, worlds connected across impossible distances. How is this possible? Because, Cooper said, feeling Leah's engineering certainty merge with his own understanding, your people have been thinking about space travel wrong. You've been trying to move through the universe. The network teaches you to move with it. Leah's contribution came through the quantum link, her technical analysis translating the network's operational principles into terms the Council could begin to comprehend. The Deep Builders didn't conquer physics. They partnered with it. Every node in the network exists in quantum superposition until accessed, making distance a navigational choice rather than a barrier. Tom Rivers added his navigation expertise. It's like having a map where you can choose which path connects to which destination. The network doesn't move you through space. It relocates space around you. The Guardian's approval flowed through the connection like warm current. Understanding grows like coral, slowly but with permanence. Enforcer Kexthal, your species possesses capabilities that could contribute to the network's expansion. Will you join the deep paths, or will you remain trapped in the shallows of conventional travel? The silence on the Council bridge stretched for long minutes as Kexthal processed implications that challenged everything their civilization believed about physics and politics. Finally, their voice carried new humility. What would partnership require? Cooper's grin was audible across space as he felt the Guardian's satisfaction. The network had waited eons for this moment. First contact not through conquest or submission, but through genuine collaboration. Learning to swim, Cooper said simply, not just physically, but intellectually. The network requires partners who can think in currents rather than straight lines. The weeks that followed transformed Hydros Prime from a research platform into something unprecedented in galactic history, a diplomatic station where species learned to interface with intelligence that predated their civilizations by millions of years. Cooper emerged from his morning dive to find the platform expanded beyond recognition. Council engineers worked alongside human technicians under Leah's direction, installing systems that could support aquatic interfaces for multiple species. The Thaloran delegation had grown from Veltar's single presence to a full cultural exchange team, their bioluminescent communications creating new artistic patterns in the water. The Zephyrians arrived overnight, Leah reported, not looking up from her engineering console where she coordinated projects that spanned 17 star systems. Their ambassador wants to know if chromatophore communication is compatible with network protocols. Cooper rubbed his thumb against his knuckles, a gesture that now carried additional meaning. Each time he did it, he could sense the network's vast attention focusing on their small platform. What did the Guardian say? That communication takes many forms, but intention transcends medium. Leah's stylus tapped against her palm as she processed readings from the latest cultural exchange. Cooper were documenting the emergence of a new form of civilization. The network isn't just transportation, it's a framework for species evolution. The proof stood around them in the form of beings who would never have interacted under conventional galactic politics. Enforcer Kexthul had remained on station, their rigid military bearing gradually relaxing as they learned to perceive currents of meaning that flowed beneath surface communications. The Crystalline Collective had sent geometric entities that communicated through harmonic vibrations, finding unexpected resonance with the network's quantum frequencies. Cooper, Minnie called from her expanded xenobiology lab, the latest water samples show something incredible. The microorganisms that make up the network's processing matrix. They're not just communicating with each species that interfaces with the system. They're learning from them, incorporating new biological patterns into the network's operational code. Cooper dove back into the network's depths, seeking the Guardian's vast presence. What he found was transformation, not just in himself or humanity, but in the network itself. Each species that learned to interface with the system contributed unique perspectives that enhanced its capabilities. The Deep Builders hoped for this. The Guardian's voice carried satisfaction that transcended individual consciousness. Not replacement, but synthesis. Each species that joins the deep paths makes all paths deeper. Guardian, Cooper asked, swimming through currents that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat, what happens now? The network was hidden for millennia. Now it's becoming the center of galactic attention. Now we discover whether the galaxy is ready for true civilization, came the reply. The Deep Builders withdrew not from fear, but from patience. They waited for the moment when cooperation would triumph over conquest. Cooper felt the truth of this as he interfaced with nodes across the network. What had started as humanity's accidental discovery had become a catalyst for galactic transformation. Species that had maintained careful distances for centuries were collaborating on projects that required thinking beyond traditional boundaries. The political implications rippled outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. The Council of Spheres, faced with technology that made their hyperspace monopoly obsolete, had to choose between attempting impossible suppression or embracing fundamental change. Their choice had surprised everyone, including themselves. "We adapt," Kexthul had announced during the first interspecies council session, their mandibles clicking in patterns that their people used for momentous decisions. For too long, the council maintained order through control of movement. But movement is not progress. Progress requires growth, and growth requires new partnerships. Veltar's people had been among the first to establish permanent liaison positions at multiple nodes, their aquatic physiology making them natural partners in network exploration. But the greatest surprise had been the Crystalline Collective's enthusiasm for the project. Their geometric forms, initially thought incompatible with fluid environments, had discovered that the network's quantum properties allowed them to exist as pure information during transit, a form of existence they described as transcendent geometry. Leah's engineering projects had evolved from simple research to active network enhancement. Working with the Guardian's guidance, she led teams that developed interface technologies for species whose physiology seemed fundamentally incompatible with aquatic environments. Her breakthrough had been realizing that the network responded to neural patterns rather than physical forms. Consciousness was the true key to access. The network's teaching us that intelligence takes forms we never imagined, she explained during a briefing to Earth Command that was simultaneously broadcast to Council member worlds. What we're building here isn't human technology or alien technology, it's collaborative technology. It literally becomes more capable as more species contribute to its development. Tom Rivers had become the network's chief navigator, his understanding of three-dimensional movement translating perfectly to mapping currents that flowed through folded spacetime. His navigation charts now included routes that spanned not just distance but probability, paths that existed only when specific conditions aligned across multiple star systems. It's like jazz, he'd explained to Cooper during one of their planning sessions. The network provides the basic rhythm, but each species improvises their own melody. The result is music none of us could create alone. Mason Ryan's pressure systems expertise had proven invaluable as species with radically different environmental needs learned to share the same networks. His atmospheric processors could now create interface chambers that supported dozen different forms of life simultaneously. But perhaps the most significant development was what many had started calling symbiotic evolution. The microorganisms that formed the network's biological processing matrix hadn't just learned from each species that joined. They'd begun incorporating beneficial traits from multiple species into hybrid forms that enhanced communication between radically different types of consciousness. "We're witnessing evolution in real time," she reported to the assembled scientific communities of 17 worlds. "The network isn't just connecting different species, it's creating new forms of life that specialize in facilitating communication between consciousness types that evolved in complete isolation from each other." Cooper floated in the center of the original node, surrounded by representatives of species that 3 months ago had considered each other dangerous aliens. Through the network's interface, he could sense their thoughts not as invasive telepathy, but as symphonic harmony, each mind contributing its unique perspective to challenges that required collaboration beyond anything their individual civilizations had ever attempted. "Guardian," he asked during one of their regular communications, "the deep builders, are they truly gone, or are they still part of the network somehow?" The response came not as words, but as experience. Cooper found himself briefly sharing consciousness with entities that had transcended individual existence while maintaining connection to physical reality. They were part of the network now, not as controllers, but as participants, their ancient wisdom available to anyone who learned to swim deep enough to find them. Cooper emerged from the interface to find Leah waiting at the platform's edge, her expression carrying the satisfaction that came when her engineering intuition proved correct. "The network's offering to teach us how to create new nodes," she announced. "Not just access existing ones, but actually expand the network to previously unconnected star systems." The implications crashed over Cooper like a tidal wave. They weren't just joining an existing galactic civilization, they were being invited to help it grow. What did Earth Command say? Leah's grin carried her characteristic dry humor. "They're sending every available deep-sea specialist and asking if we need bigger boats." Her expression grew more serious. "Cooper, this is bigger than first contact. We're looking at the next stage of galactic evolution." Through the quantum link, reports flooded in from nodes across the network. The Andromedans had established contact through the node in their galaxy's central cluster. The machine civilizations of the Magellanic Clouds had achieved interface through quantum consciousness transfer. Species that had never shared the same star system were collaborating on projects that spanned galactic distances. The network's growing exponentially, Tom reported from his navigation center. Each new species that joins brings knowledge that enables contact with previously incompatible forms of consciousness. We're looking at a feedback loop that could eventually connect every form of intelligent life in the universe. Cooper dove one final time into the network's depths, seeking the Guardians' perspective on the transformation they'd catalyzed. What he found was anticipation, vast, patient, but unmistakably excited. The Deep Builders always knew this moment would come. The Guardian's consciousness enveloped him like warm current. When the galaxy would be ready to think beyond individual species, beyond separate worlds, beyond the boundaries that kept consciousness isolated from itself? "And you think we're ready?" Cooper asked. "You are becoming ready," came the reply. "Readiness is not a destination but a current, something you swim in, not something you reach." Cooper laughed, the sound echoing through underwater chambers that had become the foundation of a new kind of civilization. Around him, beings from dozens of worlds worked together on projects that would have been impossible for any single species to conceive. Above him, the surface platforms had grown into a small city where air breathers and water dwellers shared the same spaces through technologies that seemed like magic, but were simply engineering advanced beyond current understanding. As he prepared to surface, Cooper felt the network's vast attention turn toward the outer rim of the galaxy, where new signals suggested forms of consciousness so alien that current interface technologies couldn't even detect them as intelligent. The next phase of contact would require innovations that pushed the boundaries of what cooperation could accomplish. But that was a challenge for tomorrow. Today, humanity had earned its place in a galactic community that was redefining what civilization could become. And in the deep paths between worlds, consciousness swam in currents of possibility that the Deep Builders had always known would someday connect every thinking being in the universe. The ocean nexus had become exactly what its creators intended, not a network for transportation, but a framework for the evolution of consciousness itself. And in the depths of Hydros Prime, the water welcomed all who learned to swim in the currents of collaborative existence. Cooper surfaced to find his team gathered at the platform's edge, their faces reflecting the same wonder he felt. Behind them, representatives of 17 species worked together on plans that would reshape the galaxy. Above them, ships from dozens of worlds waited to carry news of the network to civilizations that hadn't yet learned they were part of something vast and magnificent. "So," Leah said as Cooper climbed from the water, her stylus tapping against her palm in the rhythm that meant she was already planning their next breakthrough, ready to teach the galaxy how to swim. Cooper's grin carried all the confidence of someone who'd found his place in the universe, not as conqueror or victim, but as partner in the greatest collaboration consciousness had ever attempted. Let's dive deep. The ocean nexus spread its influence across the galaxy like ripples from a stone dropped in an infinite pond, carrying with it humanity's greatest gift to the cosmos, the knowledge that the deepest explorations required not individual courage, but the collective bravery to swim together into unknown depths. And in the space between worlds, ancient intelligences that had waited eons for this moment began planning the next phase of galactic evolution. The connection of consciousness not just across space, but across the dimensions of existence itself. The deep paths had always led to deeper paths. Now, finally, the galaxy was ready to swim them together.